Welcome back, Gen Xers, and everyone curious about our awesome generation. In a generation that exploded in communications and networking, as Gen Xers, we were shaped by more than our country. We were also shaped by our neighbors across the pond, Europe, the 1980s. What a time it was. It was a decade of big hair, bold fashion, and even bigger changes. Here in the United States, we often think of ourselves as the center of the universe. We have Hollywood, we have Wall Street, we have our own unique culture that seems to set the trends for the rest of the world. But during the 1980s, something shifted. Europe, a continent that had been rebuilding and redefining itself for decades, suddenly began to have an enormous impact on American life. It wasn't just about politics or economics, it was personal. It was about the music we listened to, the clothes we wore, and the way we saw our place in the world. Think about it. The decade started with the Cold War still very much a reality. Europe was divided. A massive wall split a major city in two. The threat of nuclear conflict felt real and present. But by the end of the decade, that wall would crumble. The geopolitical map of the world would be redrawn, and a lot of that change originated in Europe. The 1980s was the decade when Europe wasn't just a place on a map. It was a force that shaped who we were becoming. If you turned on the radio in the mid-1980s, you were just as likely to hear a band from Liverpool or London as you were from Los Angeles or New York. This was the second British invasion, a musical tidal wave that reshaped the American pop charts. Unlike the first invasion led by the Beatles and the Rolling Stones in the 1960s, this new wave was different. Driven by synthesizers, electronic drum machines, and a very distinct visual style, Duran Duran Culture Club. The Human League didn't just bring new sounds, they brought a whole new aesthetic. Colorful, androgynous, unapologetically stylish. These British artists were masters of the music video. With the launch of MTV in 1981, visuals became as important as the music. British bands embraced the new medium. They created mini-movies that were artistic, strange, utterly captivating. For American teenagers, this was new and exciting. A window into a fashion-forward world irresistible. A revolution you could dance to from across the pond. For most of the 1980s, the Soviet Union was known in America as the Evil Empire, a term famously used by President Reagan. It was a mysterious, closed-off society behind an iron curtain. The Cold War was a fact of life, a constant source of anxiety. Then, in 1985, a new leader came to power, Mikhail Gorbachev. He was different, younger, more energetic new ideas. He introduced two key policies: glasnost, openness, perestroika, restructuring. Suddenly, the fortress began to show cracks. Glasnost allowed more freedom of speech. It also opened a greater flow of information across the USSR and its satellites in Eastern Europe. Citizens could openly criticize the government and discuss social problems. Americans watching from afar were astonished. We had seen the USSR as a monolithic, oppressive regime. Now, news showed public debates and protests. Gorbachev became a celebrity in the West. He appeared on the cover of Time as Man of the Year. He seemed like a leader you could actually talk to. This openness reshaped American politics and culture. Fear and Cold War paranoia began to subside. He opened a door sealed for decades, helping pave the way to the end of the Cold War itself. On the world stage, the 1980s were largely defined by a powerful political friendship. This was the alliance between US President Ronald Reagan and British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. They were two leaders from different countries, but they shared a very similar worldview. Both were staunch conservatives who believed in free markets, limited government, and a strong national defense. Thatcher, known as the Iron Lady for her unyielding political will, came to power in 1979, just before Reagan was elected in 1980. Together, they formed a formidable partnership that would dramatically influence global politics throughout the decade. Their shared philosophy became known as Reaganomics in the US and Thatcherism in the UK. It was a major departure from the post-war consensus of government intervention and social welfare programs. They argued for deregulation, privatization of state-owned industries, and breaking the power of labor unions. Here in America, Reagan's policies were heavily influenced and reinforced by what Thatcher was doing in Britain. When Thatcher took a hard line against striking coal miners, it emboldened similar anti-union sentiments in the United States. Their lockstep approach gave conservative ideas a powerful international platform. Their alliance was most visible in their united front against the Soviet Union. The Reagan-Thatcher relationship was more than just a political alliance. it was an ideological one. It was a clear example of how European politics directly shaped the direction of the United States. In the summer of 1985, something truly extraordinary happened. It was called Live Aid. Organized by Irish musician Bob Geldof and Scottish musician Midge Ure, it was a massive dual-venue benefit concert aimed at raising funds for famine relief in Ethiopia. The event took place simultaneously in London's Wembley Stadium and Philadelphia's John F. Kennedy Stadium. It was broadcast live via satellite to an estimated global audience of 1.9 billion people across 150 nations. This was not just a concert, it was a watershed moment in global consciousness, and its European origins had a huge impact on America. The idea was sparked by BBC News reports from Ethiopia showing the devastating famine. Geldof was so moved by the images that he organized a group of British and Irish pop stars to record the charity single Do They Know It's Christmas under the name Band Aid. The song was a massive hit in the UK and across Europe. Its success inspired American artists, led by Harry Belafonte and Quincy Jones, to create their own version called We Are the World. These two initiatives converged into the monumental event of Live Aid, a perfect fusion of British and American star power for a common cause. The London concert, broadcast in the morning and early afternoon in the US, was a stunning display of European rock and pop royalty. Queen's 21-minute set is widely considered one of the greatest live performances in rock history. For many in the US, it was a powerful introduction to the sheer scale and passion of European rock music. The event, born from a European sense of urgency, showed Americans the power of global satellite-driven media to unite people for a good cause. November 9th, 1989. It is a date that will forever be etched in history. On that day, the Berlin Wall, the most potent symbol of the Cold War and the division of Europe, came down. Crowds tore at the concrete, pieces fell. For 28 years, the wall split a city in two, separating families and embodying East German oppression. Its fall wasn't from a single battle. It was the culmination of months of protests across Eastern Europe and the slow erosion of Soviet control. An East German official mistakenly announced the border open, and the impossible happened. People surged forward. Crowds swarmed the wall from both sides. Americans watched on television, breathless. The wall had been a permanent fixture of the Cold War landscape. Presidents had stood before it and spoken of freedom. John F. Kennedy archival, Ronald Reagan archival. Reagan's 1987 tear down this wall challenge was still fresh. Ordinary Germans on TV used hammers, used chisels, and chipped away at the concrete. Powerful, emotional. It felt like a victory for freedom the West shared. The fall of the wall hit the American psyche hard. It signaled a brand new, uncertain but hopeful era. Looking back from today, in 2025, it's clear that the events of 1980s Europe were not just fleeting headlines. They left a deep and lasting imprint on American culture, politics, and our sense of self. The decade was a period of intense exchange, ideas, sounds, political movements reshaping the United States in ways we still feel today. The world we live in now, globalized media, interconnected economies, and shifting political alliances, was forged in the crucible of that transformative decade. The fall of the Berlin Wall wasn't just an end, it was a new beginning. The musical influence is perhaps the most obvious. The synth pop and new wave sounds of the Second British Invasion never really went away. They became part of the DNA of popular music. Politically, the legacy is just as powerful. Ultimately, the 1980s was the decade that reminded America that it was part of a larger, global community. Those echoes from 1980s Europe still resonate, reminding us that the world is smaller and more connected than we might think. We have strong bonds with Europe, and with the internet, they have grown stronger. How did the European culture influence you in the 80s? Did you travel to Europe during your childhood or teen years? Tell us about it. We want to hear from you. Here at Gen X Life, you are greatly appreciated. Like and subscribe to keep up with everything Gen X. Remember, we belong to the greatest generation ever, Generation X. Keep being awesome, stay healthy, and God bless.